Welcome to the Sanity podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-host, Rebecca Sugar, we speak to the people that you want to hear from.
We're joined today by Ken Isaacs. Ken is the Vice President of Programs and Government Relations for Samaritan's Purse, an international Christian disaster relief and crisis response organization. It operates in more than 100 countries and has, is this true, over $1 billion annual budget?
That's true.
That's big. Ken has spent more than 30 years working for Samaritan's Purse around the world, and he's literally seen just about everything, and hopefully we'll hear some of that in our discussion today. His new book is called Running to the Fire. It's an incredible memoir of all of the incredible things, or probably not all of the incredible things that you've done in your work with Samaritan's Purse. And it's also, I think, a testimony of some sort, too. And I loved it. And so I'm really excited to have you here today. And I thought we should just start, Ken, with if you would tell our listeners who may not know where the name Samaritan's Purse comes from in the New Testament and why that's relevant to the work you do.
Oh, that's a great question. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me on. And in the book of Luke, in the New Testament, in the 10th chapter, there's a story about the Good Samaritan. I think people generally know of this phrase, the Good Samaritan. But in this story, there was a man, a Samaritan, a social outcast of the day, that went across the road into a ditch where a man had fell to robbers and had been beaten and left for dead. And he helped him when other people didn't, and the other religious people of the day had gone away from him. So he took him to an inn, and a cave is what they believe it is archaeologically. And he asked the innkeeper to take care of him, and he left him 2 coins the next morning. And he said, when I come back, I'll pay you more. So metaphorically, that money came out of the purse, and that's where we got the name. And the founder of Samaritan's Purse was Dr. Bob Pierce, and he's the same man that also founded World Vision.
Okay, wonderful. And can you just tell us a little bit about sort of what Samaritan's Purse does, how that mission has changed or not changed over the years, and a little bit about how you got involved and your own trajectory and journey with the organization?
So Dr. Bob Pierce had started Samaritan's Purse. It was a small fledgling group, and he got leukemia. It was terminal. He knew he was dying, and he asked Dr. Billy Graham's son, Franklin Graham, who was a young guy that had been kicked out of a school or two, if he would take it over. And Franklin was going to school in Boone, North Carolina. So he said that he would run the organization. There were only 2 employees, and that he wanted to move it to North Carolina. So the organization, as it were, which was, I think, maybe a couple of boxes of papers, came to Boone, and Franklin started running the organization. We're an evangelical Christian organization, which means that we believe in Christ as the Messiah, and we proclaim that, and we believe that we have a platform to do that by taking care of people in the ditches of life. So we do that all over the world, and those ditches get, that it's a metaphorically, they are much larger. They're wars, they're famines, they're epidemics, and so we're involved, as you said, Rebecca, in about 100 countries every year. And right now, one of the main things that we're doing, one of the big things, is our work in Israel and in Gaza.
Can you share with us sort of the decision-making around how you decide where to go, where the resources should be spent? Are there political considerations, economic considerations, religious considerations? And also, importantly, how do you know when to leave?
Well, you're asking great questions. So where we go, just minutes right before I came on this interview with you, my staff came in to see me. There was a cyclone that hit in Vietnam, and there was an earthquake that hit in Cebu, Philippines earlier today. And we made decisions to respond in both areas. But you make a decision based off of what you think the magnitude of the need is. And, part of that is a death count. It's not an exact formula, but part of that is the estimate of damage. And humanitarian access is always an issue. You need to be able to get there. And a lot of it, to be honest with you, we try to go where we feel God is leading us to go. And sometimes we see open doors that we're able to move in and get set up and help a lot of people. And sometimes you don't have those kind of open doors. So there are certain countries around the world that are closed. And I don't mean just spiritually. I mean, they're closed. You can't go in them. North Korea would be one of them. Cuba is one of them. I mean, there's a number of countries that are not accessible. And then there's other countries that are quite accessible and really with open hands are asking for help. So we make the decision. Most of our money, probably 96% of it, comes from private funding. It's private donations coming from Christians primarily in the United States. And we receive very little government funding, but we do have some government funding. And all of those things come together. We try to respond to a crisis, and then we're looking not to necessarily leave in a hurry, but there comes a time when you have to go, and there is a business aspect, or that's not a good word. It's more like a managerial balance that has to be struck. How much money have you raised for an area? How much money do you have beyond what was restricted for that area? And when has the need been met and we can leave? So you sort of balance all of that out, and that determines when you're going to go.
And in terms of sort of, where fundraising, do you fundraise for specific, regions? Do you find that I can imagine people, higher profile conflict areas, especially let's say, in the Holy Land, I could see getting more attention, but we know that, for example, parts of Africa have been ravaged, obviously, by civil war and famine and enormous suffering and enormous Christian suffering. Now we're seeing in parts of Africa as well. So in terms of, I won't say prioritizing conflicts, but the world is a big place. How do you guys kind of triage where you can do the most good?
Well, some of the major areas that we're working in the world right now, I mean, you mentioned Africa. There's a civil war in Sudan that is not talked about very much. We have major work there. We have major work in South Sudan. We have major work in Congo. We have major work in Ethiopia. We're operational in Yemen. We're working in Syria. We're working in Israel. We're working in Gaza. We're working in Ukraine. We've got a large operation there. So all of those areas that I just named could easily be classified as major humanitarian needs are in those areas. And the way that we raise our money, as I said, is from the Christian community in the United States. And we do that through a paper newsletter and the internet. And we just put up what we feel like God has called us to do, and people respond to that. And if they give this much money for Ukraine, that's how much we've got. If they give this much money for Sudan, that's what you've got. So, I mean, that's a simplistic way, but it is reflective of giving. And I feel like that I know that when I donate money, I pray about, God, what would you want me to do with this money? And so I'll dedicate it or restrict it. I'll say I want to help in Congo, or I want to help in Cambodia or wherever. And so in some way or another, I feel like God speaks to us in the quantities of money that he gives us for different parts of the world. And right now, the Holy Land is, a hotly contested area. There's a lot of suffering going on there. And there is a lot of interest there to help on all sides of the conflict, quite honestly.
So your donors can earmark specific conflicts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What I loved about your book actually was that you describe how you got involved in this work, and you really were just a guy, a regular guy, we like to call people like you, but you were. I
still am.
But you're not, right? And that maybe is the point. Most regular people don't pick up and move to Ethiopia with their wife and raise their kids there and then move on and go around the world into areas of conflict and crisis. And I think there were hints in this book about the kinds of personality traits that made you the kind of person that would do that. Your faith was clearly a dominant theme, but so were some other things about you. And I think it might help the audience to understand some of those things if you just told a couple of the stories that are in this book about the things that you've experienced. And one that jumps out at me was when you were taken hostage in Zaire. This regular guy is, being held by, I guess, rebels or military. And, you went through a lot doing this work. It's not just digging wells and feeding people. So would you tell that story?
I will. I was in a family-owned business, in a well drilling business. It was a successful business. And I went for 1 month to West Africa in 1985 as a volunteer to help guide local well drillers in a program there. And after I came back from that trip, I had this, I can't explain it, I can't put it in words, but I just had this burden in my heart. I felt called to the world. And I kept telling my wife, Carolyn, I feel called to the world. And she had a way of cocking her head and looking at me like she's trying to drill into me. And she would say, are you losing your mind? Are you okay? Have you lost your mind? And I didn't know what to say, except I feel called to the world. So I prayed about that for almost 2 years, and I didn't get an answer. And I thought that was like, I didn't know anything. I had never heard the term NGO. I had no idea of the humanitarian realm. I didn't know any of that. And I got a call on a Saturday asking me from an employee that worked for Franklin. There were like 20 people working here then. And Franklin wanted to talk to me about well drilling equipment. And it was out of that conversation that my family and I ended up moving to Ethiopia.
Franklin Graham, just
yes,
so everyone.
Franklin Graham, yeah. And so we moved to Ethiopia. There were 2 wars simultaneously going on. This was, we were there from 88 to 91. One was a civil war inside of the government for control, and the second one was a war of independence with the country of Eritrea. And it was a very complex working environment. It was right on you remember We Are the World, the 1984 Bob Geldof attention to the famine in Ethiopia. So it was sort of on the coattails of that. And I just felt like this is what I was called to do. And so when we finished in Ethiopia, Franklin and I talked, and 10 days later, I was in Turkey, moving my way across the border into Iraq during the first Gulf War in 1991. So it's been one disaster after the other since that time, and in pursuing what I feel like God has called me to do in my life. So back to your question, in 1996, after the genocide in Rwanda, we had an office in Rwanda, and I got a call on the radio from a missionary down in Zaire. And he said that he had about 60,000 people that had fled in around his mission compound. And there was all kinds of illness, and they needed antibiotics and medicine. So we put together a load, and I went with the airplane into Zaire. I had a visa from the Zairean embassy in Rwanda. That's where I was at when I heard the radio call. We didn't have cell phones then. We used shortwave radios. And we landed, and the guy at the airport was very hostile. We landed about 4 p.m. in a grass strip in a place called Bunia. And he confiscated my passport and the passport of the doctor that was with me, Dr. Mike Van Rooyen, who is the head of emergency medicine up at Harvard now, and also the pilot, Curtis Wilkerson. And he told us to go to this mission hospital, which was a 10-minute flight away, and to come back the next day, and we would get this resolved. I didn't even know what he was talking about. And I learned something very valuable that day, and that was that the country of Rwanda had launched an attack against the country of Zaire because they wanted the 2.3 million people to come back to Rwanda. About 1.3 million did come back to Rwanda. But I unfortunately entered the country the day the war started, and I came from Rwanda, and I just missed that little facts matter. And so the next morning around 6:30 or 7, when I came out of the house, there were about a dozen guys with machine guns outside looking for James Isaacs, my first name that I don't go by. But and that ended up, it was 11.5-hour interrogation throughout the day. And then they held us for about a week. And that the Zairean troops were coming from the south, and the Zairean troops were famous for victimizing their own people. They were absolutely brutal army. And Congo still has issues with this today. And it wasn't looking good. They had moved us into Bunia. We were staying in a man's house, Ian Campbell. He was the mission director for African Inland Mission there. And there was a doctor, an optometrist by the name, or an ophthalmologist by the name of Dr. Tony Ukati. And he came in one morning and he was not healthy looking. He was gray looking. He's very, very black skin. And his color was gone from it. I've never seen that. I said, Tony, are you okay? I thought he was going to have a heart attack or something. He said, we've got to get you out of here. He said, they've told their supervisors, their chief officers in Kisangani, that they've got 3 Americans in an airplane here. When the soldiers get here, they will kill you. And so it, you know, there was some drama there for a couple of days. And I had brought $10,000 with the expectation that I would pay duty on the medicine that we brought in. And they never charged the duty, which is very unusual. And at the end, I kept giving Tony money. And I said, you got to get us out of here. They'll kill us. So it seems like $7,600 has always been in my memory of what I paid to get out. I had to write a receipt. I turned it in. I claimed the money. And but the thing that was really strange, Rebecca, was they legally deported us. It was early one morning at 6 o'clock. We were told to leave the house and run up this alleyway. There's gunfire going on, and we go, and I have to sign a piece of paper at a desk in a house, and I couldn't read it. And I told the man, I said, you're going to have to translate this for me. And Mike said, sign the paper, man. Come on, we got to get out of here. Like, really, guns are going off outside. And I said, Mike, they can kill me, but they won't kill me because I signed a piece of paper admitting to something that I didn't do. I need to know what that paper says. So the man behind the desk translated it for me. He was angry. I signed it. We got in the car. We get to the airport. And the man that had overseen the interrogation came to me and he said, Mr. Ken, how do you like Zaire? I said, I love Zaire. And he said, well, you know, I want to come and visit your country. So I took a business card and I wrote down every phone number that I could think of because I thought if he comes to North Carolina, I definitely want to meet this man on my ground. And I complimented him. I said, you're very professional in your interrogation. And he said, well, you know, your intelligence agencies taught me how to do that. I said, well, that's very good. And then he said, do you see this brown man over here? I said, yeah. He said, he's from Egypt. Would you please take him out? He's a military advisor. They'll kill him when they get here. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. We have a policy, only employees, which was true. But it was weird, the immediate reversal of power roles there. And at the end, I took the guy out and we dropped him off in Uganda. And then in 2018, I was in Addis Ababa and I happened to meet the ambassador from Egypt. And this was, you know, 1996 to 2018. You can count the years. I think it's 22 years and more, and 24 years. And he said, the ambassador told me, Mr. Isaacs, my country owes you a debt of gratitude. I said, really, for what? And he said, in 1996, in November, you brought an Egyptian man out of Zaire. That man had 2 daughters, and they're still alive. He's still alive, and we thank you for saving his life. He would have died there. And that surprised me. It broke me down literally into tears that they had tracked that long and thanked me. And I've never seen that guy. I wouldn't know that guy from anybody. But anyway, we got out and we're thankful that we did and went on to the next thing, which at that point was in Bosnia.
Wow. Let me ask you, what an amazing story.
I want to know what your wife said when you came back from being held hostage in Zaire. Did she say, I told you so?
Yeah. Well, let's just say you've outlasted Zaire, I think is fair to say. On a more kind of like strategic level, you know, there's been a lot of debates, you know, here about things like USAID, about the UN's role in different conflicts. What have you found, at the risk of sounding simplistic, what works? What works in terms of humanitarian distribution? What are, you know, either on a kind of very logistical supply chain level or on a sort of, more attitudinal or sort of ideological level? I mean, I'd love your take on sort of a kind of global take on where do aid organizations go wrong, where do they go right, and what have you found to be best practices in terms of your own work?
That's a great question. It's a deep subject, so I can only in the short time frame, high stroke it. But I do believe that when you look at international humanitarian work, there's become a humanitarian industrial complex. I believe that developed up in the U.S. government. USAID was closed down. They had a budget of $43 billion. And there are a lot of articles written about aid was cut and people are dying. But I think that's not the right question necessarily. I think the question also has to be asked, if you had that $43 million, were people still dying? Yes, they were. They were dying of AIDS, they're dying of starvation, they're dying of many different things. But what if you had $100 billion? Could you stop it? And actually, no, you couldn't stop it. And so the question comes up, is the United States slated to be the primary philanthropic supporter to the world? And I don't think that we can do that. We're the largest economy in the world, but there's a trend going on among other donor nations, which would include England and Canada and Germany and Japan. Their charitable giving is also going down, their humanitarian giving. But what about China? They're the second largest in what do they give? Very little. And the burden of caring for humanity around the world needs to find a more equitable fashion for people to share the load than what is going on. I think that, I worked at USAID. I was the director of the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance for about 16 months. So I've got some familiarity with that, some familiarity with the State Department. And I know the UN agencies fairly well. And right now the UN is going under a struggle because I think they also have a humanitarian industrial complex that they control under their umbrella, that infrastructure. A part of that is needed. Where I have a problem with it is that when the institutional needs of those entities supersede the humanitarian needs of the people, and it becomes we've all read stories about people staying in 5-star hotels or, coming into the disaster, and all of that happens. What I like are people that are committed from their heart, and they have some kind, as a Christian, we have a commitment to go there and help. And so I relate very closely to that. And I'm willing to sacrifice for what I believe in to help other people. And so, I can't say that I've got the formula for everyone in the world, but I think that we're getting ready to see some major adjustments in the way that things are happening. I think even I read a couple of weeks ago that Tom Fletcher, who is the UN humanitarian coordinator, acknowledged that the UN has become, I don't know if he used the word bloated or whatever, but he was reflecting on its size and its efficiencies and all of that. But I think we're going to see some changes in the humanitarian realm.
So this relates, of course, to the situation in Gaza, and you've written about the Gaza Humanitarian Fund and what you saw when you went there and investigated the kind of aid that they're delivering and the way in which they're doing it. And would you just tell us what you saw and what your impressions are of that system now, and maybe even dip in a little bit to what you think going forward in light of the announcement of Trump's peace plan or proposal, if by some miracle it's accepted by Hamas, what that would do to aid delivery in Gaza and who you think the most responsible parties are to provide that aid.
Yeah. So Gaza is very complicated. Israel is very complicated. That's nothing new to you guys. You know that. And when I went to see the GHF, it was back in July. I have to tell you, I was skeptical of them because they popped up out of nowhere, and I've been wondering, who are these people? Where are they getting their money? Are they an NGO? Are they a private company? Are they a security company? What are they? And so through contacts, I was able to reach into the organization. And I went there, visited with them, I talked with them, and then I asked, could I stay with you guys for a few days? And they said, yeah, you're welcome. So I stayed with them for about 3 days and actually spent the night in one of their fellows' apartments. And what I saw was not what I had been reading at all in the papers. They're talking about people are dying and they're killing people. That's what I was reading, is that GHF is killing people. And but when I was there talking with them, they told me that they had never fired a shot and that they had not killed anybody. There was an incident that happened where a gate was swung closed and crushed 20 people. And it is very hectic. It's not a textbook perfect kind of food distribution system that they have in these secure distribution zones. But it's working. I'm not an advocate that it needs to be the UN or it needs to be GHF. What I'm saying is that anybody that can get humanitarian access to people, that can feed them, can provide medical care, clean water, whatever their needs are, they all need to be working together to achieve those goals. So I wouldn't want to see GHF pushed out. I was on a call yesterday. I know that there's a lot of strong feelings about the militarization of aid. And what I have a hard time understanding, even coming from Secretary General Guterres, he said he wanted localized solutions, and he didn't want to see the militarization of aid. So that would be like when the UN had armed escorts in Somalia and still do today, and in Yemen and Iraq and Haiti. I was down there working with the UN, and the presence of the 82nd Airborne down there was a stabilizing force to calm people down. And right now, the people that are out of the conflict areas of Gaza, they need to feel calm. They need to feel like there's hope coming somewhere. And the kind of things that we read in the paper that really disturb me are GHF distributed food at 2 sites today and 42 people died. So there's this inference of cause and effect, but you don't know who shot those people. You don't know what's going on. And I just think that they have been, there's a distortion of the facts around what's going on there. And, I went over into the secured zone and I interacted with Palestinians freely and talked with them. They're very thankful for the aid. They're fearful of Hamas. They're fearful of coming there from Hamas and Hamas attacking them. And they told me Hamas has threatened to kill us by being here. Is GHF perfect? No, it's not perfect. Can it be better? Yes, it can be better. But I think that there's 4 principles that are important to remember. The first one is to save lives and reduce suffering. And the first one is save lives and reduce suffering. That's important to remember that, because if your second one of neutrality and your third one of impartiality and your fourth one of independence of operation fails to save lives and reduce suffering, then you're letting the pursuit of excellence become the enemy of the good. And I have a problem. I'm very practical in those kind of things. If I see somebody shoot somebody, I'm gonna say something. I'm not gonna be quiet about that. But I think that we all need to work hand in hand to find the ways that are effective. And Israel has their hands full. It is a mess with the whole Gaza thing, and I applaud President Trump and Tony Blair and everybody that's trying so hard. I know many of the people that are involved in it. And I pray for peace for the Middle East. And if there's a role that we can do, I want to do it. I want to help.
I mean, one thing I think that, you've really spotlighted effectively is how humanitarian assistance, doesn't exist on a blank canvas, right? I mean, you're interacting with governments, with militias, with the sort of international political arena. And I imagine, every humanitarian zone you work in is a complicated sort of environment. And I'm just wondering how do you guys sort of make those assessments? Do you have people on the ground? Do you have government contacts. I mean, I imagine a situation like Haiti, at some point, I think a lot of organizations decide Haiti is so unsafe, we can't even sort of be there anymore. So I'm just sort of, curious about, your method, not about necessarily choosing sites, but kind of like once you've chosen a site, how you help your people navigate that environment.
Well, the issue of humanitarian access is extremely important. Like, you've got to have the access, and I have these cute little sayings that I say. One of them is, if you're around people with guns, it's a good idea if they're your friends. So I don't want to have hostility. If I'm working with armed actors, I don't want to be in a hostile environment with them. I want to at least be able to have a cup of coffee and talk to them. And but I look out for the welfare of our staff. You need top political cover. You've got to have ground coordination. You need to be, and you can gain a lot of very important influence by helping the people on the ground, because they're a very influential group, right? I mean, if you got 100,000 people or 50,000 people and you're feeding them, they're going to exercise their own control. If you're trying to go into, like, there are some areas of the world right now you can't get into. Al Fashir in Sudan, you can't go there. I mean, we're trying to, no, we'll shoot the planes down. That's what we were told. And, but it is a constant task and a worry to ensure that you've got good humanitarian relations to do the work that you want to do. I think humanitarians are used to, and look, I went up to Solferino, Italy. There's a guy by the name of Henri Dunant in 1859. He went there to meet Napoleon III. He saw this big battle, and out of that came the Geneva Peace Accords, the first one, the Geneva Convention in 1864. And they identified three protected, you can't kill prisoners of war, you can't kill medical providers, and you can't attack hospitals and medical facilities. Well, those things aren't happening now. But what came out of it was the notion that you could wave a white flag up on your car and nobody would shoot you. Now, if you wave a white flag on your car, 9 times out of 10, you can become a target. And so that safety, that humanitarian umbrella perception of safety doesn't exist like it used to. And to me, being just a practical well driller, it's like, okay, I understand that. I've got to make arrangements because I don't want my people hurt. And I never ask anyone to go anywhere that I haven't gone or wouldn't go myself. So, it matters.
Can I ask you, Ken, in the age of technology, you mentioned before that you were talking on a satellite phone or whatever you were, the old technologies that you had to use when you started this work. And now, of course, technology has dramatically changed. Can you just give us a sense of the ways in which it's helped your work and maybe in some ways complicated your work?
Well, that's a great question. I remember the first satellite phone that I spoke on was in Kigali, Rwanda in July of 1994. The UN had it set up, and it had a dish like 8 feet in diameter. It was huge, and it was out on a deck and under concrete wall. And I asked him if I could call my office just for the novelty of it. I didn't even have anything to record. And I called and talked with Franklin, and he said, "What are those sounds?" I said, "They're bullets." He said, "Where are you?" And I told him, and he said, that was our first exposure to a satellite telephone. So today we have, you probably, I bet within your reach, you've got an iPhone on your desk. And through that iPhone, you can go to Chatbot GPT or any other AI source, and you can get very detailed information on anything that you want in the world. You can communicate to anyone, anywhere in the world if they've got a reciprocating piece of equipment, and probably 90% of the people in the world do. So it makes the world a smaller place. It makes it better for logistics. It makes it better for reporting. But those same things can also be used against you in some operational theaters. And I'll tell you, in Ukraine, where you've got very close proximity between the Russians and the Ukrainians, we've had very serious attacks that have come from Russia on our phone systems, and we've had to destroy our phones because they've been compromised. And so you have to be careful. What do you use for cybersecurity? What kind of encrypted messaging do you use? What platform are you on? Are you WhatsApp? Are you on Signal? Or do you have a VPN on your phone? There's a whole world out there of that, but you have to be very careful about it. And now with Elon Musk and Starlink, you can get something smaller than this computer screen, and you've got immediate satellite communications anywhere in the world. And it's wonderful. It's handy, but it has changed things. It's a force for good. The communications, it's made things easier, but it also presents its own challenges. If you're not thinking about it, you can be surprised sometimes.
Ken Isaacs, thank you so much. Stay safe and continue with your good work.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on today. And I love your scenery there on the wall.
Well, your background is probably more useful. I mean, but you got to know where you're going.
Well, you know what? I gotta do this.
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
The book is out, and everyone should go and get it. It's on all the main, all the
Great
places you
title.
can get a book.
Yeah, and if they read it, I would appreciate it and love it if they would put a review on Amazon.com.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much for
the
being
least
here.
we can do. Okay, take care.
Thank you
Bye,
for
Ken.
having me on.
Thanks.